Tried to cook a romantic dinner. Burned down the kitchen. I thought impressing her with a home-cooked meal would be romantic. Turns out I can't even boil water without causing chaos. Okay, let me start from the beginning. Her name is Emily and she's the type of person who notices the little things. The way her hair catches sunlight in the morning, the way she hums under her breath while doing literally anything, the fact that she can tell when a coffee is slightly under-extracted. Basically, I'm convinced she could tell if I boiled water at 210 degrees Fahrenheit instead of 212 degrees Fahrenheit. And yet, in my infinite wisdom, or let's call it male overconfidence mixed with absolutely zero kitchen sense, I decided the best way to impress her was to cook a romantic dinner. Let me clarify, I cannot cook. I once tried to make instant noodles and ended up flooding the entire countertop. My signature dish, if we're being generous, is toast. And yet here I was, imagining a candlelit evening with soft music, fancy dishes, maybe even a dessert that doesn't come out of a freezer. Because yes, apparently I was feeling ambitious. I started my mission a week before D-Day. I like to over-prepare, mostly to have time to fail spectacularly. I spent hours scrolling through Instagram, watching cooking videos with chefs who made everything look impossibly perfect. How hard can it be? I asked myself, sipping on my third cup of coffee. It's just food. Food is food. Famous last words. First things first, I needed a menu. After a long emotional internal debate between stuffed lobster and spaghetti, I settled on something slightly ambitious but not insane. Garlic butter shrimp for the main course, a side of roasted vegetables, and chocolate lava cake for dessert. All of this I had seen executed flawlessly by chefs wearing aprons that cost more than my rent. I thought, if they can do it, so can I. Except, without the cameras, lighting, and 3 assistant chefs. Shopping was an adventure in itself. I went to the grocery store with a list that looked like a chemistry exam. 3 cloves of garlic? Fine, I can do that. 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Wait, tablespoons? What's the difference between a tablespoon and a teaspoon again? Fresh thyme. Who even keeps fresh thyme? And most importantly, chocolate. I spent a solid 10 minutes debating between 70% dark chocolate and 85% dark chocolate. Naturally, I bought both. For science. Walking through the produce aisle, I was trying to act like I knew what I was doing, while secretly poking at eggplants like they were alien artifacts. Then it hit me. Emily is a vegetarian. Wait, she's not vegetarian. But her cousin once dated a vegan, so maybe she's sensitive to animal rights? Panic set in. I ended up buying shrimp anyway because my brain was like, no, trust me, she'll love this. Shrimp is classy. By the time I got home, I had 3 grocery bags, 2 almost burned fingers from the plastic bags, and a mental list of everything that could go wrong. But of course, my overconfidence was fully intact. I even put on one of those aprons that said chef in training because apparently wearing it increases culinary skill by 400%. Spoiler, it doesn't. I set up my kitchen like it was a Michelin star restaurant. Pots, pans, chopping boards, measuring spoons, spatulas. I had everything I needed. I even lit a scented candle to set the mood because ambiance is important. By now, my brain had constructed this vivid mental scene. Emily walking into my apartment, eyes wide with admiration, saying something like, "Wow, you made this? For me?" While I nod modestly, pretending I always knew how to make shrimp sautéed in garlic butter like it's nothing. And then reality came knocking. First, I realized I had no idea how to properly peel garlic. I tried smashing it with the side of a knife like I'd seen on YouTube. Half of it went flying across the countertop. Some of it landed in the trash, some of it under the fridge, and somehow 1 clove ended up on my shirt. By the time I finished peeling the rest, my kitchen looked like a tiny crime scene. Next up, chopping vegetables. You think carrots are straightforward? I sure did. That was all, until one rogue carrot decided to roll across the counter and nearly take out my phone. My hand was trembling. Not from fear, but from sheer adrenaline because knives are scary when your hand-eye coordination is a little questionable. I glanced at the shrimp next. The recipe said, saute shrimp for 3 minutes on high heat. 3 minutes? Seems easy. Except I didn't know the stove had settings from 1 to 10 and I turned it up to 11. Literally, it screamed in protest the moment the shrimp hit the pan. Smoke started rising immediately. I waved my hands like some kind of amateur wizard trying to cast a spell to disperse it. I opened the window, which was a bad idea because now half of my carefully laid out ingredients were being blown onto the floor by the wind. I'm not proud of it, but I was beginning to panic. At some point, I realized I had forgotten to season the shrimp. I tried adding salt, then garlic powder, then maybe a sprinkle of sugar. Honestly, I can't remember because the chaos was overwhelming. I was muttering things like, it'll taste fine, even though the shrimp had developed a slight char and smelled vaguely like an abandoned campfire. Meanwhile, I was constantly checking the clock. Emily would be here in 2 hours. 2 hours! I was running out of time to salvage this catastrophe. I glanced at the chocolate lava cake instructions. Easy, they said. Molten chocolate in 10 minutes, they said. 10 minutes? Sure. If you're not me, I attempted to melt chocolate over a double boiler, which I assured myself I understood. 3 minutes in, the chocolate had hardened into a grainy mess. I poked at it with a spoon, got chocolate all over my apron, and then, in true slapstick fashion, flicked some onto the ceiling. It was at this point that I realized maybe I shouldn't have put all 3 pots on the stove at once. Smoke started filling the kitchen like some dramatic scene from a horror movie. The fire alarm, bless that screaming demon, went off. I waved a towel like a man possessed, trying to silence it. At this point, the apartment was filled with a combination of smoke, flour dust, chocolate chunks, and general chaos. I think the neighbors were considering calling 911, but I reassured myself, it's just smoke, romantic smoke, totally intentional ambiance. By now, I was sweating like I'd just run a marathon. My hair was sticking to my forehead, and I was covered in a mixture of garlic, chocolate, and what might have been crushed thyme. And yet, against all odds, I kept going because giving up was not an option. I had to see this through. I glanced around one last time before Emily arrived. The kitchen looked like a war zone. Flour on the floor, vegetables scattered everywhere, pans on every burner, and the faint smell of what I hoped was gourmet garlic butter wafting through the air. I took a deep breath. I could do this. I had to do this. This dinner would be the night that changed everything. Or more realistically, the night that would go down in the annals of embarrassing disaster stories. And then it started. I lit the stove, grabbed a pan, and attempted to saute the shrimp. Smoke immediately started curling from the pan like it had its own personality. I waved my hands frantically, muttering, "Just stay in the pan, please." I thought, this is fine, this is fine. Little did I know, the real chaos was just beginning. By the time the doorbell rang, I was covered in flour, chocolate, and the remnants of herbs I can't even name. The kitchen was a mess, the fire alarm was still groaning in the background, and I was standing there, holding a pan of what might have been edible shrimp or a small culinary crime scene. And that, dear Reddit, is where my journey began. The moment I opened the door and tried to act like a charming, capable human being, when in reality, I was one misstep away from burning the entire apartment down. Romance, as it turns out, is mostly about pretending you know what you're doing while secretly hoping no one notices the smoke. Little did I know, the next few hours would be a roller coaster of embarrassment, chaos, laughter, and absolute disaster. But that's a story for later. I didn't realize that when a recipe says high heat, it doesn't mean call the fire department. Okay, so let's pick up exactly where I left off. Standing in my kitchen, covered in flour, chocolate, and something that may or may not have been crushed thyme, holding a pan full of shrimp that looked like it had survived a minor explosion. The smoke alarm was giving me the judgmental beep of 1,000 disappointed grandmothers, and I was trying to play it cool like, yeah, this is totally under control. Just a smoky ambiance, nothing to worry about. Emily walked in at that exact moment. Now, you have to understand, she wasn't expecting a perfectly cooked dinner. She was expecting me, cute, slightly awkward, probably fumbling over words. What she got instead was a scene that looked straight out of a low-budget disaster movie. Smoke curling into the ceiling, flour dusting the counter like a failed snowstorm, and me standing there with a pan in one hand and a spatula in the other, muttering to myself like a madman. Her first words? "What is happening?" I smiled, nervously. A little too much teeth, maybe. "It's ambiance," I said. "You know, like smoky romantic. Very smoky romance." I waved my hands in an effort to look casual. That only made the smoke swirl faster around my head, giving me the distinct impression that I now resembled a man in a poorly executed steam bath. She raised an eyebrow, the kind that immediately makes you aware that she's simultaneously terrified, impressed, and slightly amused. "Ambiance," she repeated. "It smells like burning?" No. Smoked. It's smoked. Gourmet smoked shrimp. Very avant-garde. Now, let me tell you, the smoke was not gourmet. It was the kind of smoke that makes your eyes water, your nose run, and your brain question all life choices leading up to this moment. And that was only the beginning. I put the pan back on the stove, trying to salvage the shrimp, and that's when disaster officially escalated. I had forgotten to turn off one of the burners, so the oil in the pan started to smoke violently. Little flames flickered. I panicked. I waved my spatula at it like it was a fly, because apparently that's a logical way to deal with fire. Smoke began to billow like a fog machine at a bad concert, setting off the smoke alarm again. The alarm is loud, like brain-meltingly loud. And as if on cue, Emily jumped, which honestly made me panic more because now I had to calm her and the kitchen at the same time. "It's fine," I shouted. "It's fine, totally fine." Her response, dripping with sarcasm. "Yeah, totally fine. You're just flaming shrimp and smoke everywhere. Very fine." I attempted to fan the smoke with a dish towel, which, in retrospect, probably only made things worse. Smoke spread to every corner of the apartment, drifting under doors, up the hallway, probably to the neighbor's place too. The smell? Imagine burnt popcorn, old socks, and garlic butter all colliding in a poorly choreographed aroma fight. Delicious if you're a pyromaniac. Then came the pan. Oh, the pan. In my panic, I flung it like a frisbee in the hope of redirecting the flames. Naturally, it slipped from my hands, clanging loudly on the counter. Some shrimp went flying. One particularly ambitious piece landed on the floor, curled up like a tiny, scorched shrimp-shaped demon. daring me to try eating it. I could feel my dignity evaporating faster than the butter I had melted earlier. My inner monologue was a screaming, chaotic mess. You've ruined everything. You're a disaster. She's going to leave and tell everyone you can't cook for toast. You've peaked. This is it. Meanwhile, Emily had taken a step closer to the stove. Do you need help? She asked cautiously. No, I'm fine, I replied, waving my hands like an amateur conductor of a very out-of-tune symphony. This is where the chapter title comes in. The Fire Alarm Symphony. Every beep, every hiss, every sizzling shriek from the pan was now a musical accompaniment to my absolute disaster. I tried to salvage some semblance of order by moving the shrimp to another pan. Mistake. Big mistake. The flames from the first pan, combined with my frantic movements, managed to knock over the pot of vegetables. Carrots, bell peppers, and a rogue zucchini made a spectacular crash onto the counter and floor. I swear I could hear them groaning. Oh my God, Emily whispered. And I don't mean in the romantic, impressed way. I mean in the, I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life way. Relax, I shouted, smoke streaming out of my nostrils. It's fine, it's all fine, just part of the process. By now, my kitchenware was staging a rebellion. The blender had somehow fallen from the counter. Don't ask. A knife slid under the fridge, and I may have accidentally smashed a spatula in my panic. I looked like a man trying to perform surgery on a tornado, which is accurate. Then it happened. The neighbor knocked on the door. Loud, insistent, judgingly. Is everything okay over there? Came a voice that could cut glass. I panicked. What do I say? Yes, totally fine. Just testing the smoke alarm. For science. The door knocked again. Emily looked at me. Science? She said. I waved vaguely, hoping the gesture would distract her from the black smoke curling around my head. No luck. I attempted to open a window to ventilate the smoke, and that's when the candle I had lit to set the mood fell over. Flames licked the edge of the counter. I did what any reasonable person would do. I flapped my hands and screamed at it, which is not a recognized firefighting method, by the way. The smoke detector started wailing like an air raid siren. The neighbors started banging harder on the door, and I swear the shrimp in the pan were mocking me. Emily, surprisingly calm, grabbed a nearby dish towel and slapped at the pan. Somehow, she managed to contain the small flames. I stared at her in stunned silence. She just saved my life and the dinner, maybe both. Next time, she said, eyebrows raised, we order pizza. I nodded vigorously. Absolutely. Next time. Totally agreed. By this point, the entire kitchen smelled like a war zone. Smoke was everywhere, the fire alarm was still going off, and the air was thick with the scent of burnt shrimp and vegetables. I was covered in flour, chocolate, and, well, everything else. I looked like a man who had survived a hurricane, a tornado, and a minor chemical experiment. I tried to salvage some dignity by scooping the shrimp into a plate. Half of it was burnt beyond recognition. The other half looked edible, maybe. Emily leaned over, sniffed it, and then did that thing where she pretends not to gag. Smells interesting, she said, carefully avoiding the words. You've ruined everything. I took it as a win. And then came the sprinklers. Or maybe that was just my imagination. Honestly, at that point, I wouldn't have been surprised if the ceiling had opened up and a fire truck descended into my kitchen. The chaos had reached a level of cinematic absurdity that I can barely describe without collapsing into laughter. And through it all, I kept thinking. I wanted to impress her. I wanted romance. And now, here I am, standing in a smoke-filled kitchen, trying not to pass out from embarrassment with her quietly giggling at my incompetence. Ladies and gentlemen of Reddit, that, my friends, is what I call cooking on high heat. And it was glorious in all the wrong ways. By the end of the night, I had managed to salvage a tiny portion of food. Emily had survived without calling the fire department, though the neighbor may have filed a formal complaint. And I had learned an important lesson. Never, under any circumstances, trust a recipe that says high heat if your cooking skills are anything like mine. And yet, despite everything, she laughed. Not at me exactly, but with me. And somehow I survived my own fire alarm symphony, if barely. Little did I know the story wasn't over. Chapter 3 would test my damage control skills, my ability to explain my failures, and my relationship with Emily, all while my kitchen lay in smoldering ruin behind me. But for now, I lived. And that, dear Reddit, was a miracle in itself. They say romance is about the little things. Apparently, it's also about surviving your own kitchen apocalypse. So let's rewind a little. The kitchen was basically unrecognizable. Smoke still lingered like a stubborn fog. Flour was everywhere, even in places I'm pretty sure it shouldn't exist, like the lampshade, and the burnt shrimp lay on a plate like casualties of war. I was standing in the middle of this chaos, half covered in chocolate, half in flour, entirely in regret. And Emily? Well, she was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, eyes wide, silently deciding if she wanted to stay or just start Googling apartments for rent far away from me. The first step in damage control is denial. At least that's what I told myself. I waved my hand dramatically. It's character building smoke, very ambiance-y, romantic in a rugged way. Emily tilted her head. Rugged? She asked, eyebrow raised. Is that what we're calling burning food and minor kitchen fires now? I tried to laugh. It came out as more of a choking, coughing, please don't leave me noise. Exactly. Rugged. Very rustic. You know, like a French countryside chef who's also clumsy and slightly panicked. She laughed. That sound. That laugh. I swear it was the only reason I didn't spontaneously collapse in despair. It was half amusement, half pity, and entirely sincere. And honestly, I deserved the pity. I had set out to impress her with a perfect romantic dinner and had delivered a full-blown culinary apocalypse. Step 2. Cleaning up the battlefield. I grabbed a dish towel and started trying to wipe the flour off the counter. Mistake. Flour puffed into the air like a tiny white cloud and settled on my hair. Now, instead of looking like a rugged, slightly stressed chef, I looked like a snowman in a disaster movie. Need a hand? Emily asked, trying not to laugh so hard she spit coffee on the counter. Yes, please, I said, flinging a spatula in her general direction, which she skillfully dodged. Just don't touch the shrimp. That's science. Science says it might still be edible. Emily shook her head and grabbed a wet cloth. You're lucky I like a challenge, she said. And that's when I realized something important. She wasn't angry. She wasn't disgusted. She was laughing with me. Maybe not at me exactly, but definitely at the situation. And that tiny realization saved my dignity a little. We started the slow, painstaking process of cleaning. The floor was a minefield of vegetables, chocolate chunks, and whatever had fallen from the spice rack when I panicked earlier. I was picking up carrots with one hand and wiping smoke-stained counters with the other, muttering things like, just pretend this is part of the experience, a messy, culinary, smoke-filled bonding experience. Emily wandered over to the burnt shrimp plate, poked it with a finger, and said, you know, if we pretend this is charcoal-inspired gourmet cuisine, it's actually kind of impressive. I blinked at her. She's serious? Really? I asked, cautiously optimistic. Sure, she said. It's got character, a story, a history, like a good book or a very messy cooking show. That's when I realized that maybe, just maybe, the entire night hadn't been a total disaster. Maybe my intentions, however catastrophically executed, actually mattered. I had tried, I had cared, and even if the kitchen looked like the aftermath of a small hurricane, my sincerity had come through. Step 3. Salvage the evening. At this point, the shrimp were beyond redemption, the vegetables looked like they'd been in a minor explosion, and the chocolate lava cake had hardened into something resembling a hockey puck. So, logically, I ordered takeout. Emily laughed when I pulled out my phone. So, after all that effort, we're just ordering pizza? Yes, I said, holding the phone like it was a lifeline. The pinnacle of romance, burnt shrimp, smoke alarms, and then pepperoni. Classic. Timeless. As we waited for delivery, we cleaned what we could. Emily was actually helpful, and I learned a few things. She knows exactly how to hold a sponge without creating more chaos. She doesn't mind my incessant muttering about culinary techniques, and she laughs in a way that makes even total failure feel like an adventure. At one point, I tried to explain the shrimp disaster in a way that didn't sound like a complete failure. You see, I was attempting to achieve the perfect Maillard reaction. I started using fancy chef terms I only vaguely understood. Emily stared at me. Which is browning, the perfect browning, very artsy, I said, waving my hands as if that justified everything. She rolled her eyes but smiled. You know, you could just say, I burned the shrimp, I said, nodding solemnly. Yes, that, exactly that. The pizza arrived, glorious in its simplicity. We sat down at the table, the same table I had envisioned for my fancy, romantic dinner, and dug in. I couldn't stop glancing at the kitchen, which now looked like a post-apocalyptic set. Flour dusted everything, smoke stains lingered, burnt pans glared at me like tiny metallic judges. Emily reached over and grabbed my hand. You know, she said, this is kind of perfect. Perfect? I asked, skeptical. Yes, she said, smiling. Not the dinner, not the kitchen, not the shrimp. But you tried, and it's funny and a little disastrous, but also you. I choked on a bite of pizza, not literally, but emotionally. Because wow, I had imagined this night being perfect, Instagram ready, something I could brag about to my friends, and instead it was real. Flawed, messy, chaotic, and full of laughter. And somehow, that made it perfect in a completely different way. We spent the rest of the evening eating takeout, occasionally sneaking glances at the kitchen and bursting into laughter at the memory of my pan-flinging, smoke-dodging antics. I explained the chocolate lava cake failure in dramatic fashion, using hand gestures that may have sent a stray piece of hardened chocolate flying onto the floor. Emily pretended not to notice, which I took as further evidence of her patience and kindness. And through it all, I realized that romance isn't about perfection. It's about effort, sincerity, and being willing to look like an absolute fool for someone you care about. Sure, I had set the kitchen on the brink of disaster, but my intentions had been genuine, and she saw that. That mattered. By the time the evening ended, the kitchen still looked like a battlefield, but Emily and I had survived. We had bonded over the mess, over the chaos, over my utter incompetence. And as we cleared a small area to eat our pizza, I thought to myself, this is actually better than any Instagram perfect dinner I could have made, because this is real. As we finished eating, Emily leaned back and said, next time, maybe we just cook together. You handle the chopping, I'll handle everything else. I nodded enthusiastically. Deal, but only if we can wear matching aprons that say disaster chefs, she laughed. Absolutely. And in that moment, surrounded by smoke-stained counters, burnt pans, and a mountain of takeout boxes, I realized something important. It didn't matter that I burned the shrimp or almost caused a fire. What mattered was that we laughed, that we survived the disaster together, and that the bond between us had grown stronger in the chaos. They say romance is about the little things. Apparently, it's also about surviving your own kitchen apocalypse. And somehow, against all odds, we had done exactly that. I burned down a kitchen, and somehow she still agreed to a second date. Yeah, you read that right. Let me give you the full scoop, because this story doesn't just end with smoke, burnt shrimp, and a lot of embarrassment. It became a legend that would haunt me, amuse me, and surprisingly, strengthen a relationship I've been trying to impress from day one. So there I was, standing in the middle of what looked like a culinary crime scene, with Emily laughing next to me and takeout boxes scattered around like confetti from some post-apocalyptic parade. The kitchen was ruined. I mean, not, oh, I accidentally spilled some sauce ruined. I'm talking full-on smoke-stained counters, scorched pans, flour clouds lingering in corners, and what I'm pretty sure was a little burnt garlic still clinging to the wall. It's the kind of mess that makes you want to disappear from society entirely, or at the very least, stop inviting anyone over ever again. But Emily didn't run. She didn't scream. She didn't even leave a strongly worded Yelp review about the smell. Instead, she laughed. And that's when I realized something crucial. She loved the chaos almost as much as she would have loved a perfect dinner. It didn't happen overnight. At first, there was the awkwardness. I tried to explain what happened without making it sound like a complete failure. So the shrimp, well, let's call it extra charred for flavor enhancement. Very gourmet, I said, waving my hands wildly. Emily raised her eyebrows, smirked, and said, "Sure, the Michelin Guide will be calling any minute now." From there, the disaster started taking on a life of its own. I began joking about it online. Reddit first, of course, because that's where people appreciate a good train wreck. Tried to cook a romantic dinner. Burn Down the Kitchen was the title, and honestly, it got more traction than I ever expected. Comments flooded in. At least you tried. Send the shrimp to me. I'll finish it. This is the content I live for. And just like that, my shame had turned into social media gold. I posted pictures too. Not full-on evidence of my crime scene, but carefully staged shots. A pan with suspiciously charred shrimp. A plate half buried in flour. A smoke-stained countertop with a proud little note. Love is messy. People loved it. Friends tagged each other, laughed, and some even offered kitchen disaster insurance tips. Emily, of course, had a field day. She kept teasing me mercilessly. "You know," she said, "I was half expecting you to accidentally order a pizza and set that on fire too." "Hey, that's a valid strategy for creating suspense in dining," I replied, pretending to look dignified while holding a coffee-stained apron that had seen better days. And then came the second date. Somehow, despite the chaos, the smoke inhalation, and my catastrophic lack of cooking skills, she agreed. She smiled and said, "Let's just eat somewhere else this time." I nodded enthusiastically, silently promising myself I would never touch a stove alone again. Here's the thing. The charred dinner became more than a failed cooking attempt. It became a story we told to friends, to family, even strangers if the opportunity arose. "Remember that time I tried to impress her and almost burned the building down?" I'd say, and everyone would burst into laughter. Emily would roll her eyes, smile, and add her own commentary, embellishing the chaos until it became pure legend. What struck me most was how this night revealed something deeper than a perfectly cooked meal ever could. I realized that relationships aren't about perfection. They're about humor, patience, and surviving disasters together. My cooking skills didn't impress her, but my willingness to try, to embarrass myself, to put myself out there, that did. It was messy, ridiculous, and sometimes horrifying, but it was honest. Over time, I embraced the humor completely. I posted more updates online, jokingly rating my kitchen disasters from slightly smoky to full-on fire hazard. Friends began sharing stories of their own cooking fails. Reddit threads started calling me the charred dinner legend, and Emily would laugh every single time someone mentioned it. She even started joking about it herself. "Careful, or we'll need a fire extinguisher for date night," she'd say with a grin. I also learned a few practical lessons. For starters, always have a fire extinguisher. Check. Never trust a recipe that says high heat if you've never cooked before. Check. And maybe, just maybe, don't try to impress someone with complex meals when your signature dish is toast. Check, check, check. But beyond practicalities, the emotional lesson stuck the most. I learned humility. I learned to laugh at myself. I learned that a relationship thrives not on flawless gestures, but on shared experiences, even if those experiences involve panicking over a stove while smoke alarms scream at you. And I learned that someone willing to laugh with you at your failures and maybe even enjoy the chaos is someone worth keeping around. As weeks turned into months, the legend of the charred dinner grew. We told the story at parties, each retelling adding a little flair. A pan flying across the room, shrimp taking flight, neighbors knocking, and the smoke alarm wailing like a tiny banshee. It became a testament to our early relationship, flawed, hilarious, and completely unforgettable. Even now, every time I step into a kitchen, I can't help but smile. I see the counters, the stove, the burners, and I remember the night I almost burned down my own kitchen, nearly ruined my romantic plans, and somehow survived with both my dignity and my relationship intact. And Emily, she still laughs about it. Sometimes, she even brings it up unprompted, in the middle of a quiet evening, just to remind me that love isn't about perfection. It's about chaos, laughter, and the willingness to embrace both. The charred dinner became a metaphor for so much more. It wasn't just about cooking, it was about taking risks, making mistakes, and discovering that those mistakes don't have to define you. They can define a story you share, a laugh you have, a bond you build. It was about being human, messy, and completely, wonderfully imperfect. By the end of it all, the kitchen may have survived, but it wasn't the same, and neither were we. We had survived the night, laughed at the disaster, and discovered a shared sense of humor and resilience. And that's why, to this day, when someone asks about our first dinner date, we don't talk about what we ate. We talk about the smoke, the fire alarms, the charred shrimp, and how it all somehow worked out. It's the night that made our story ours, messy, ridiculous, and unforgettable. And in the end, I wouldn't trade it for a perfectly cooked meal or a smoke-free kitchen. Because the legend of the charred dinner isn't just about burning shrimp. It's about surviving the chaos together, laughing through the disaster, and realizing that sometimes the messiest moments are the most memorable. So Reddit, if you ever feel like you failed spectacularly, take it from me, embrace it, make jokes, share the story, laugh at yourself, and if you're lucky, someone will laugh with you, even after you've burned down the kitchen. That's how disasters turn into legends, and that, my friends, is how I accidentally became a legend. Charred shrimp and all. Alright, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. We have so many more amazing stories coming your way, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to reach 100K subscribers by the end of this year, and we love for you to be part of this journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.